The 2022 Toyota RAV4 Hybrid. People have been waiting almost 9 months for their orders at this point, which makes this a very sought after vehicle. So we're going to be taking a slightly different approach in this video. We're going to be looking at this more as a general RAV4 buyer's guide. So not only are we going to be driving the hybrid variant, we brought along this 2020, which is a older model of this generation, which is a XLE, and this is naturally aspirated. So we're going to be talking about what it's like to live with, what it costs you to own, and really whether or not this is a vehicle you should actually buy. So let's talk about the interior space first. Doesn't matter what trim level you buy or what variant, the RAV4 is essentially a bread box. It has 69 cubic feet of cargo capacity, which, given how small the footprint of this vehicle is relative, is very impressive. This is a very well packaged vehicle. It's got the same interior volume as something like a BMW X5. The interior space is very old school. It's almost truck-like. Everything is chunky. You have a low dash. All the controls are physical and easy to use. It does look hyper generic though. It doesn't matter if you have a Limited, which has leather and nicer interior pieces, or this XLE, which is cloth. It feels kind of cheap, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because even with almost 50,000 miles, this particular interior space in this XLE has aged very, very well. All the controls are easy to use. You have good visibility. Really, it's kind of what you want in a basic SUV. The one thing I will bring up as a negative in this vehicle, other than the dated infotainment, which hopefully will be updated here shortly, is it's kind of noisy for what it is. If you get into a CX5 or even the new Nissan Rogue, the NVH levels from road noise and wind noise is definitely higher in this vehicle. The other thing to talk about as well is general build quality. I've been in quite a few RAV4s over the year, and this XLE, for example, has a wind gap in the door that the Toyota dealers don't want to fix because they say it's normal. It does bring in wind on one side, which is pretty annoying. And again, if you're spending $30,000 to $35,000 in one of these vehicles or more, you should expect better when it comes to QC. But with that, I think it's time for us to head into the shop and put this thing up on the lift.
RAV4, Jack. We're looking at a historical version of this latest generation.
Yeah, this is my significant other's RAV4, and she has put 50,000 miles on this thing. This is a 2020. We also took a look at a 2022 RAV4 Limited Hybrid. So we spent a little bit of time in both. I guess the goal for this shop segment is kind of walk you through the differences, the pros and cons of both vehicles, and what you can expect if you're going to buy one of these things. As we talked about, there is an exceedingly long wait time to purchase some of these vehicles. Like the hybrids are like 9 months to a year at this point.
And I think, you know, we're seeing cars and people complaining about sports cars not coming to market, or you're waiting a long time, or you're getting bent over at dealerships. I mean, think about that, waiting almost a year to get a RAV4.
Yeah, a washing machine, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, but I think it also goes to show you how much in demand these things are in, how much they're going to hold their value, and how functional they really are for what they're offering, with a huge spread of price, of course, too. Yep. Let's start with this guy. This is kind of like the
So this is the bread and butter. This is the XLE with some options, and it has the naturally aspirated 2.4 liter with the on-demand all-wheel drive system. If you go to the Limited or the Adventure, you get a TVD or the TRD Pro variant.
Yeah, you get the torque vectoring rear differential.
Which, to be honest, will be nice if you're in bad weather, but if you just throw a set of snow tires on this like we do in the Midwest, it's totally fine. When it comes to consumable costs, that's the advantage of something like this. She puts an absolute assload of miles on this card. It's basically free to run. A set of tires are between $600 to $800. Snow tires are in the same range, and you don't need to replace them that often. Brakes, rotors, pads, a couple $100 total. They're not expensive to do. And as far as serviceability goes, that's the one advantage that the naturally aspirated engine has over the hybrid. If you look at something like a Venza or this RAV4 hybrid, sooner or later, typically around the 150,000 mile mark, you're going to have to do a battery pack, which is expensive. You don't run into that problem with this. The naturally aspirated four-cylinder, while it is rattly and buzzy, gets in the low 30s to high 20s when it comes to miles per gallon, where the RAV4 hybrid, which is very impressive, it gets almost 40 miles to the gallon, which is very, very good.
I mean, it really becomes, where do you live? If you live in a more temperate climate where you don't have extremes on the battery pack, you might get longer, and you may get way longer on the battery pack. But if you're where we live, where you have really hot summers, really cold winters, you're going to be doing that, and you have to weigh, do you want the mechanical complexity and the cost of potentially replacing a pack, or do you just want to have a little bit less fuel economy? But aside from the fuel economy part, the naturally aspirated engine is one of the most obnoxious four cylinders in terms of, like you said, NVH rattliness. So
it sounds like it's a sewing machine.
Yeah,
which
I mean,
is
not in a good way
no.
either. I mean, it doesn't sound good.
It's not smooth remotely. The other thing I will bring up is if you do get the hybrid, the advantage in fuel economy is in the city and at lower speed.
Yeah.
When you're going like 80, 85 miles an hour, while there is a small improvement over the gas-powered, it's not that huge difference like you're expecting.
You get a traditional torque-converted automatic with the naturally aspirated version. When you go to the hybrids, you get the eCVT, which has planetary gear sets, so you don't get that nasty-ass, like what you consider Nissan CVT sound or reliability. So overall, this is an amazing SUV because just like we talked about the Lexus RX 350, TNGA K, this is shared among almost, I mean, every
Everything.
mid-size car that Toyota and Lexus makes. And the byproduct of having a platform like that is parts are widely available. Every single aftermarket manufacturer, every single tire manufacturer has tires for this. You can get so much shit for this car that keeping it long-term is no longer like, if you got some weird, like a Volvo, for example, you got an XC60 that they don't make
There's
a lot of.
something esoteric about this remotely. So if you're someone like my girlfriend who owns this, she doesn't want to deal with anything when it comes to a car.
Right.
She just wants an appliance that you can pile miles on. That's the advantage of this vehicle.
It literally is. It's like coming home and you don't want to do laundry. You put your shit in. You want to make sure that the cycle finishes and your clothes are dry, and that's is maximum you want to do with that, and that's the maximum you want to do with a RAV4 like this. I can see why people like it so much, but let's take this out on the street. We're going to do a drive. We're going to talk through some of the hybrid stuff and then the naturally aspirated version.
Perfect.
Jack, when we're in press cars, normally it smells like Adidas cologne from all the journalists who think they're badass. But why does this car smell like salt and vinegar, potato chips, and dog ass?
Well, Mark, this thing has 48,000 miles of putting dogs in the back of this and going to farmers markets because she's a white girl. So let's see how this goes. That rattly.
No, I want to hear it.
You know, when they were working on the 2020 RAV4, I'm sure they were thinking LFA with this symphony of noise. Yeah. Let's feel these brakes. Oh, yeah.
I just got 0G. So yes, it's a loud four-cylinder. We already know that. Thank God they haven't put fake engine noise on top of it really to bring out the worst.
You mean like the Rogue we just drove?
Oh, yeah, God. So, fuel economy, what are we dealing with here?
Well, let's see what she's been getting over. So over the 48,000 miles, she's averaged 32.4 miles per gallon.
That's actually pretty good.
It is very good. And we drove the RAV4 Hybrid earlier. That got 40 in our 500 miles with it.
Okay, so you've driven both back to back over this past like 2 weeks or so. Talk me through the differences. Why would somebody choose the hybrid aside from fuel economy over this like?
It's more refined.
Okay.
It is noticeably more refined. You don't hear the drivetrain all the time. Yes, it's every bit as rattly as this is when you nail it. You're trying to wind that thing out. But when you're just around town, just getting off the line, the hybrid drivetrains, and Toyotas, as we even talked about in the recent RX video, that's what they do the best now.
Yeah.
They don't do internal combustion four-cylinders anywhere as well as like EVs or hybrids, I think, at this point. And that's the benefit, is fuel economy and refinement. I do think the gearbox in this is better because it isn't a CVT, right?
Yeah.
It is a traditional
It
automatic.
just sounds natural. It sounds normal, what you're used to.
But other than that, they are the same. They are basically the quintessential appliance or NPC mobile. This doesn't do anything particularly the best in its segment. In many ways, I think the CR-V has a better interior. The Rogue has nicer material choices. It may even look better than this.
The CX5 or that generation.
It drives way better dynamically. That is probably the closest thing to a car. The CX5 drives really, really well. But what the RAV4 does well is, other than it, yes, it'll outlive you and is basically a cockroach. It'll never die if you change the oil and you do regular maintenance, is that it blends everything really, really well. It's very usable. This thing is enormous. We talked about in the interior segment. All the controls are traditional. You don't with anything. It's just a regular SUV that you know is going to be dependable, and all of the basic inputs are pretty good. I think it maybe handles a little better than the Rogue, but not as well as the CX5. It's big like the CR-V, but you're not like straddled to a 1.5 liter turbocharged four-cylinder. So with a CVT.
It's an interesting car because I found myself questioning all these NPC SUVs because they're all very much similar. I mean, they have to be, right? Because you know the core audience that you're trying to get. You're trying to sell 500,000 of these a year, 300,000 to 500,000 of them. What do those people want? And now they've all copied each other. when I get in the RAV4, and I know you talked about the interior, I think what this does well to me is it does feel very traditional. It feels not gimmicky. Everything about the interior space has this really strong sense that you get in it and you know how everything works. The knobs, buttons, and switches are not cumbersome. There's no bullshit about how you use this, that, or the other. I like that about it, even though it feels generic in a lot of ways, but everything works about it, and I think they blended all the drivability things. It's just good enough in handling. It's just soft enough. The brakes are just normal enough. The throttle calibration is normal. Like, just they blended.
It is hyper forgettable because they've done such a good job focus grouping this thing to death. I know Toyota knows that if they up the RAV4, it's going to be a bad financial quarter for them. It's a very important vehicle, and I think because they have, again, done their research and tried to make everything just good enough, it's a very compelling package, but again, it's not one that will ever necessarily stand out in any way other than just being very competent.
I am not a car person. I want something that I know is going to hold its value, that is likely going to last, that does everything right, that I don't have to think about. This is why so many people choose this, because it just works, period. And that's as complicated as it gets with this, honestly, with the RAV4. I mean, if you love cars and you're in and out of a lot of cars, you're going to hate this thing. I mean, it's true.
It makes me think of a conversation we had with a certain VW gentleman who went on a tirade about how much he hates that the RAV4 is the best-selling CUV SUV. And I get it, because the Tiguan and the CX5 do drive better than this.
Yeah, there's other SUVs that do things better than this. They're by a large margin. But the thing is if you're buying a commodity SUV like this, right, you're clearly not out for, I don't need a premium experience. I don't want an ultra luxury experience. I don't need a high performance like tire burner. I want something that has low running costs, good reliability, great dealer network. This is quintessential RAV4, and I mean, the price spread, there's something here for everybody, and I really appreciate it about this car.
Yeah, and the proof in its long-term reliability is look at your girlfriend's RAV4. Right. It's amazing that both of our significant others drive these things. But hers is like 400 years old.
It's a 2003. Yeah, I mean,
and
it's just rotted out. I mean, it's sat outside its entire life. Literally, it's never been garaged for more than a year in the 20 years that it's been on the road.
And she's like worst case for an owner.
Right. No, I mean, it literally is the worst case. And other than that falling apart from rot, that thing will start and run with, I think the longest oil change she went was like 25,000 miles. And I mean, it just works. And I think that's all you need to know. I'm not saying to do that, but that's what you know the RAV4, that's what it's good at.
Yep. So with that, Mark, let's head into the final thoughts, sir.
All right.
Final thoughts on the RAV4. Here are some of the pros and cons. Pros, you know it's going to be reliable. It's essentially a giant bread box, which means you can fit a lot of shit in this thing. It's very, very usable. The running costs are relatively low, and it returns very, very good fuel economy. And on top of that, whether you get the eCVT or the 8-speed automatic, the gearboxes are well done. The dealer network is very large as well, which is another pro, and they have high residuals. Cons. The interior space is pretty generic. While it is usable, it doesn't look as modern or as premium as what you get in the Nissan Rogue, the Kias, or the CR-V, which is basically a Civic on the inside. The interior space does feel kind of cheap. The other con is the naturally aspirated 4-cylinder. While it is very reliable and does return good fuel economy, it is definitely on the more rattly and agricultural side of things. It does not feel remotely refined, and it is a very, very buzzy experience, and things like the door cards aren't that large as well. But if you are looking for that SUV that does everything well, you know you're not going to have to worry about it, and you know it's something you can own for 10 plus years and put 300,000 miles on, this is sort of the de facto choice. So with that, thanks for watching. Hope to see you soon.